All right, what we're going to do today is talk about the news. I write an article called The Brief every single morning. I get up at 5 o'clock. I started at 6 and it is published at 8 o'clock, and it's just gone 8 now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a video version of it as well, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm basically just going to read it and tell you about it. So, welcome to Tuesday, and there was a stunning picture by Phil Hilliard on the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning of Australian cricketer Mitchell Starc. He's a bowler, giving it his all, launching himself literally off the ground. But the curious thing about the picture is the bloke at the other end, who's supposed to be batting, is standing there with his ankles crossed, as you would, wouldn't you, if you facing Mitchell Starc? So that's a bit weird. But anyway, it is a strong picture. And according to Marcus de Blanc-Smith, the elaborately named Australian reporter, some 40,000 Barmy Army folks, that's the English supporter contingent, in case you don't know, are either on their way or they're here already. So it's shaping up to be a very big event indeed, the Ashes, as it always is. Now, sticking with the telly for a moment, there's a front page story from Aidan Devine and Jake McCallum, quoting real estate experts who say the federal government's expanded first home buyer scheme launched a wave of panic buying, say the journos. It's an interesting piece because the government's clearly trying to do something good here, help more people get into their own homes, yet it's been pilloried as somehow a bad idea. People always say the press pick the negative angle, don't they? Anyway, so yes, house prices are rising, but supply and demand, or rather the lack of it, is also clearly another factor in rising house values. So that side of the story would be good to see too. And then we move on to the Australian, which is also a News Corp publication here, and that goes big on the BBC story and manages to turn it into yet another of their many swipes at the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. Long story short, the Beeb ran a story of Donald Trump speaking back in 2020, and that speech ultimately led to some of his supporters storming the Capitol building. The problem with a later BBC Panorama News programme was the film company who supplied the spliced video of the speech did it in such a way as to make Trump look worse than he is. I know, some feat. But seriously, a real lapse of judgment by the UK's national broadcaster, which has led to the resignation of its Director General and its head of news. And Trump has now threatened, as he does, a $1 billion defamation suit against the BBC. But somehow that also has something to do with our very own ABC. The Australian do like to give it a bit of a hammering. They've got a big graphic there about some of the issues. That story by Thomas Henry says in part, revelations the ABC's Four Corners similarly edited the address, that's a big speech that Trump gave over 70 minutes, have fueled concerns over the public broadcaster's ability to meet its own impartiality standards. Seriously? Of course the speech Trump made that day was cut and spliced. I've read the entire 70-minute transcript, and I have to say you'd need to cut and splice that. Much of it is just idle rambling and boasting, and I add a link to it there as well if you have a spare hour and a bit. The point is the BBC made a bad error of judgment. As reported yesterday, didn't make that splice video themselves, but they definitely should have checked it. And it's nothing to do with the ABC though. But according to an editorial in the Australian, ABC and BBC share common ill. The ABC shares much in common with its British counterpart, says the editorial, across the full spectrum of self-righteous causes, from Middle East politics to gender activism and a performative loathing of US President Trump, says the editorial. And then we get on to Men in Black. Now, there's a picture on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald and a story by Alexandra Smith and Jessica McSweeney this morning, and a confronting picture from Flavio Brancaleone of black-garbed neo-Nazis posing outside Parliament House. I don't know what scares me most, the lack of fashion sense or the bad hairstyle choices there. I'll just put an eye in fashion. But seriously, in an opinion piece on page 5, Jenna Price says we just witnessed state-sanctioned Nazism, which seems rather strongly worded, but comes off the back of neither the police commissioner nor Premier Chris Minns seemingly able to tell reporters how the march by such a divisive bunch was allowed. One of the results is, hate laws may be strengthened. Well, that's always a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Now, in other news, no Nazis and no BBC stories on the front page of the Australian Financial Review, who stick to their knitting this morning with a story by Angela MacDonald-Smith. Giant 1 billion New South Wales battery hit by delays. Now, this is MacDonald. I'll just spell her name, right? This is why you have to sub-edit things. MacDonald-Smith reports is the world's most powerful battery storage project being built north of Sydney. Unfortunately, there's a failure by one of the 3 giant transformers, and it's a major headache for the developer and putting pressure on the transition away from coal-powered generation, says MacDonald-Smith. That story nudges up against the beginning of a linked piece by Jennifer Hewitt, which in part says many countries are quietly retreating from their ability to meet climate targets. And on page 4, there's a story by Philip Corey and Ryan Kropp, which says next year's COP31 Environment Conference could cost up to $2 billion. That's the event the government is fighting to host in Adelaide, but Corey and Kropp's story also reveals the city doesn't have enough accommodation for the expected number of delegates. Well, that's a bit awkward. All of this may be moot, though, because Turkey is also angling to host the event, and that impasse has still not been solved. Meanwhile, in Melbourne, The Age has a front page exclusive, not seclusive, as I say here. I'm just doing it on the run, aren't I? You know, which is good. It's like working for a daily paper. And that's an exclusive from the elaborately named Chip Legrand. What a great name, Chip. And Rachel Eddy on proposed new laws to limit or curtail the wearing of masks during demonstrations. So I've got a few little typos here. That's limiting the protesters, not the police, you understand. They can probably still wear masks if they want to. Premiers promised mask laws to fall short, says the headline to the story, which says, I've got a lot of errors here, which says State Cabinet will decide on the extent of the proposed new law later today. And the best front page today, drum roll please, goes to the Herald Sun. Gee, there's a lot going on that page, and you're going to have a look at that, all right? And it's laid out in a superbly engaging way and is just brilliant. Mix of stories is engaging. There are some great headlines, and it's shouting out, read me. It takes real skill to squeeze this much on one page, so well done to subs and designers. I'm just going to give you a quick little picture of that if I can. Hang on a second. Oh, no, I won't. Anyway, look, let me know what you think of this, and I'll do it every day, whether you like it or not. Thank you.